You know, for a hobby that began all the way back in the 1950s, a lot of video games have been created. Some even become popular enough to span multiple entries, such as Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Persona, and many, many more. But there are some games, even within those popular series, that sort of slip under the radar and are what we might call underrated. Today, we're going to be discussing a whole buffet of titles that we feel fall into that category.
Huh?
That's right, we. This is a very special project, a collab that brings together a whole bunch of awesome creators. First up, we have a relative newcomer to the scene.
Hi, how are you?
But that doesn't make his content any less incredible. He's the one who got the ball rolling and initially brought up the idea of a collab. So I wrangled up a crew, wrangled up a posse, and we've brought to you one banger of a video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Take it away, J-Man.
You got it, Cy. Now, I'm sure we've all been to a good theater show at least once in our lives. Maybe even once and witness a dashing maiden on stage. Now, picture yourself going to an all-female theater production only to find out that the crew working there are all low-key soldiers who fight crime by piloting mechs. Yeah, that's Sakura Wars for ya. Can't get more anime than this, right? Going back to the 90s and early 2000s, you weren't just going to Sega for the blue blur himself. Sega was pumping out a truckload of franchises throughout that entire decade, with many of them being looked upon as cult classics today. And one of the more special and unique game series that they were putting out, I'd say, was Sakura Wars. If you take elements of visual novels with a little bit of dating sims for you culture gentlemen out there, mixing it with an occasional tactical/action RPG, while sprinkling it with the heart of Sailor Moon and the fun of your average harem anime, and you pretty much got this series. The games take place in the Taisho period of Japan, with a bit of a steampunk vibe to it. Basically, you play as the protagonist, and you join a theater troupe comprised of several chicks. Thing is, they also function as a secret combat unit by the country's navy. So not only do you gotta maintain the name and business of your theater production group, you also gotta suit up and deal with the occasional demon threats that come knocking at your doors, terrorizing the city around you. These games were a huge deal in Japan and were one of the main reasons for picking up a Sega Saturn and Dreamcast if you're a fan of this genre. Plus, Sakura and a few other characters made some neat appearances and crossovers such as Project X Zone, and it's got some pretty great anime adaptations that you should definitely check out. All of this sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, here's the problem. Most of this series is Japan only. It's just as the saying goes, Japan gets the best stuff out there. You see, the thing is, Sega back in the day marketed themselves as primarily a boys brand in the West, running away from military trucks, spray painting graffiti all over the place on roller skates, bashing the heads of thugs on the streets. This was Sega, a band of anime waifus with the central focus of love and inspiration? Yeah, you overshot Gus by a couple of miles. But in all seriousness, what really sucked is that the only mainline title we actually did get fully localized in the West was the 5th entry being Sakura Wars So Long My Love. Alright, give me a show of hands of those who actually heard of this game. Cool. To all 0 of you who raised their hand, I bet you guys can guess how well So Long My Love sold in the West. And what's worse is that the game didn't even do that well either in Japan and became one of the lowest selling entries in the franchise, which resulted in the series being completely shelved and never touched again by the company for over a decade. Which is why I'm so glad Sega decided to give this series another chance with the soft reboot game in 2019. Fun fact, this was also one of the earlier Sega titles that utilized the newly built Hedgehog engine too. So when the game came out and I bought it, I genuinely had a great time with it. I found it to be an excellent starting point for newcomers to the franchise and for old school fans to be reintroduced to this series. If you're into the friendship bonding aspects of games like Persona, you'll definitely dig this game. It's got a great story, a wonderful cast of characters, and is so wonderful to look at visually. There's a lot of fun to be had in Sakura Wars, especially if you're a big fan fan of anime. If this series piques your interest and you by so happen to have a PlayStation, totally pick up the PS4 reboot game. And if you end up liking it, totally spread the word so that Sega can not only put the game on other platforms, but also potentially localize the rest of the series for the West. And best case scenario, remaking the classic Sakura Wars games using this exact same engine. All of that would be awesome because I would love to see this franchise once again become one of the premier Sega titles for not just Japan, but for the rest of the world. It's seriously one of the cooler things Sega has ever done, and rumor has it that they're working on a new game right now. And if that's true, let's all keep our fingers crossed to see our girl Sakura take center stage once again.
Hello everyone, Genma the Samurai here. So when Cyrus approached me and asked me what game I wanted to talk about, I had to think about it for a bit. I almost decided on Crosscode or Golden Sun since I think those are games that, while acclaimed, are not the most popular titles in the world. Though you should definitely play them, yes, this is a threat. But after sitting on it, I figure there's only really one game I should talk about, and that is Shining Force 3. I joke not, this is probably the single greatest game that I have ever played that no one has heard of. Now, some people know of Shining Force, notably Shining Force 2 on the Genesis, but 3 was dealt pretty much the worst hand ever. It's locked to the Sega Saturn, with 2/3 of the game requiring fan translations to even play, with the game having next to no word of mouth. Shining Force was developed by Camelot Software Planning, the creators of Golden Sun, and it's a tactical RPG series where you can freely explore towns and talk to NPCs between maps. What makes Shining Force 3 unique from its predecessors, however, is that the game is technically made up of 3 smaller games, each of them the length of a normal Shining Force game. Across all 3 scenarios, you follow different main characters from different sides of the conflict, and the cool thing is that the actions you take in the early scenarios have ripple effects into the later ones. For example, failing to save a specific character in this map will actually affect dialogue and events later on, and there's lots of small stuff like this throughout the games, and it makes the entire trilogy very replayable. The story is also really engaging with a lot of lore and political conflict if you're into that. This game also takes place after Shining the Holy Ark, another Saturn title, though the references to it are pretty subdued until the last scenario, so if you decide to skip that game, it really isn't necessary to understand this one. The gameplay and map design also got a big jump in quality compared to the previous titles, with a weapon skill system that adds a lot of depth to the combat. They also added a friendship mechanic that works somewhat like support bonuses in Fire Emblem, as well as weapon effectiveness. The maps are also easily some of the most engaging ones in the series, with various different side objectives or alternate methods of clearing them. And additionally, there's a really cool map move mechanic where you can fight on multiple maps at the same time, and it's a lot of fun. In general, this game feels a lot closer to Fire Emblem than the previous Shining Force games, and I personally welcome it. A big problem though is that there is admittedly some jank to the movement and camera, but with time you can get used to it. It is an early 3D RPG. Now for those of you who have played Golden Sun, this is the game Camelot made right before they left Sega and joined Nintendo, and it features pretty much all of the same dev team, including Motoi Sakuraba, who created a very different soundtrack than I was used to from him, and it fits the game perfectly. The fan translation project is also really good, with them working towards fixing some of the glitches and issues in the original release to make the experience as good as possible. Now, the chances of this trilogy ever getting a re-release is unlikely, but hopefully that will change if the game gets more awareness. If you are a fan of Golden Sun and Fire Emblem, I think you are in for a good time. This is easily the most overlooked gem I have ever played, and I cannot recommend it enough.
Hey there, Cyrus here. This time I'm the one who broke into Genma's house. And don't tell him that I ate all the food out of his fridge. That meatloaf was pretty good though. Anyway, Genma just wanted me to let you guys know, if any of you out there end up giving this game a try, to give you guys a epilepsy warning. As it is a retro game, there's a lot of flashing lights and all that stuff. Now, he says it's specifically the most egregious in Sequence 1, and Sequences 2 and 3 are much less aggressive, but it's still present nonetheless. And with that being said, let's get back into the video, shall we?
What is going on over here in Cyrus land? What's up all? My name is Cali Q. I cover fighting games and JRPGs, and when my brother Cyrus hit me up about today's topic about a game or JRPG that is underrated and deserves a little bit of love, attention, and support, I already knew the title I had in mind. I speak about it all the time on my channel, and since it's the fall season, this game always gives me that cozy fall feeling. And that game is none other than Radiata Stories for the PS2, came out all the way back in 2005. Now this game, as you can see here on the screen, sits at a 74 over 36 critics overall with an 8.3 user score. This is surprising to me because Radiata Stories is not a game that I would have gave the yellow mix mark to. If you follow my channel, you know how much I love Radiata Stories. The plethora of different recruitable characters, its living, breathing, and vibrant world that you can explore. The fact that the main character Jack can interact and kick any single thing in the game, from rocks to trash cans to even other NPCs, the different personalities, all of the different characters that you run into along this journey. I don't see how Radiata Stories as a whole is just barely making it on the decent or average side. Now again, I'm being biased here and I really don't care. I'm just going to point out some of the strengths that I see of this game. First of all, the characters. I love that Jack Russell as a main character, he doesn't take himself too seriously as other somewhat JRPG protagonists tend to do. Sometimes they're either overly stoic, or they're silent protagonists, or they're just goody gotta save the world. Well, Jack was just himself, and you came to love him or either dislike him for that. Now, this game was developed by Tri-Ace and published by Square Enix, and I believe that Square Enix still owns the right to the Radiata franchise. For me, I would love to see another entry in this series because there has been nothing like it that I've ever played in all of my JRPG experience. This game is just so special. Its charm is unmatched, its charisma is off the charts, and like I said before, where it lacked in the technical aspect, it made up for in its charming world, its day and night system, and its living and breathing characters, all complete with each of their own schedules, day after day after day. This game gets my pick for the game that deserves a lot more support. I would love to see a remaster of it. I would love to see it brought back into the forefront. I would love to see it have a second chance, especially with JRPGs booming the way that they are now. There's definitely a fan base that is waiting to be unveiled and unleashed with this type of game right now. This is what the JRPG genre needs. Yes, I am pushing hard for it because I would love to see Radiata Stories come back. So this game gets my full support, it gets my full love, and I wish you guys could experience this game because it's just so different. It's not perfect, it has some issues, it's a Tri-Ace game, let's keep it real, but it reminds me of if Suikoden and Star Ocean had a baby. That's the best way that I can describe Radiata Stories. So thank you, my man Cyrus, for letting me get on here and share my love for Radiata. I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you for having me on here, and I'll see you guys hopefully next time. Bye-bye now.
Hello everyone, and wait a minute, what am I doing here? That's better. Hey everyone, what up, man Kaiser here, and thank you Cyrus for allowing me to be in your collab. It was an absolute pleasure. That said, if there's an underrated game that I think deserves more appreciation, it would have to be Fate Summer Remnant. Now this game was a massive surprise for me, especially last year, given the fact that it's not only from the Fate series, where the track record of really great games is kinda low, but also the fact that coming from Omega Force, the same people that makes, Warriors Musou games, I was surprised on how well crafted and amazing this game was. Everything about it that you love in the Fate series, from its epic stories to its lovable characters, especially from the animes, are all lifted into this brand new original tale, following the story of Miyamoto Iori as he teams up with Saber to fight against rival servants in order to claim the Waxing Moon ritual. Everything about it by having just fantastic world building, to a great cast of characters, to even some nice twists and turns and character development. But also you have a really fantastic combat system that feels more RPG action approach compared to the other Warriors Musou games, but still has some that makes you still feel really powerful. Not only that, but you also have really tough bosses and a fantastic soundtrack to boot. The art style itself really blends well thanks to some amazing character designs here, and overall this game was an absolute treat by having some cool mini games and decent exploration. Everything about this game really took me by surprise, honestly, as this game felt like this is Omega Force's best work, especially compared to their other licensed Warriors games. And we can see that this took a standard and some inspiration, especially when we look onto the brand new Dynasty Warriors game, as it took some elements from Fate Samurai Remnant. For better or for worse, depending on who you talk to. But overall, this is still a great game, and recently it's been on sale for a while now, and there's also the DLC expansions that has some really good content with some improved gameplay features, new characters to play, and some interesting stories here. So overall, if there's a surprise, underrated game that I think deserves more appreciation, it would definitely be Fate Samurai Remnant. It's a great game for not only newcomers to the Fate series, but also a great game for Fate veterans like myself here. That said, thank you Cyrus for allowing me to be in your collab. Can't wait to see what everyone else's picks are. Until then, Mad Kaiser, out.
Hey there everybody, Crimsonrosso here, video game reviewer, delicious steak sandwich enjoyer, and professional deer fighter. And I was invited to this lovely little collab to talk about a game that deserved so much more love than it got. And for my pick, I wanted to give a shout out to the massively overlooked JRPG known as Eternal Sonata, a Bandai Namco title published that, despite reviewing well and having its own set of fans, didn't get anything else after its initial release. No sequel, no remaster, not even a Steam port. You know you got washed when you don't even get a Steam port. It was just released and, well, that was it. And that's such a damn shame considering how much charm this title has. From the incredibly colorful anime aesthetic that was slowly becoming less and less of a design as the PS3 and 360 era started making the more hyper-realistic graphic style the more popular and streamlined demographic. It was also a JRPG on a home console, something that had become less and less common as JRPGs were leaving those and moving over to the handheld space, like the DS or its successor the 3DS, or the PSP and then the Vita. But more than anything else, this game deserved to be remembered for its absolutely incredible gameplay, as it is easily one of the single most unique JRPGs I've ever touched gameplay-wise. While the basis of the game is pretty much turn-based combat with 3 party members, what makes the title so interesting is that each turn, a player is placed on a timer of around 4 seconds, and you are given that time to do basically whatever you want. You can attack the enemy, move your characters around to take advantage of the positioning, so they can utilize things like the light or the shade in order to launch powerful special attacks, heal your party, and so much more. It's without a doubt one of the most interesting combat systems I've ever had the joy of experiencing, and it is a damn shame its combat system and the entire game it's attached to will probably forever be lost to time until Bandai Namco actually does something with it. If you've got yourself a chance, whether it be through a PC that can run an emulator, or you just own a console like a 360 or a PS3, I beg of you, give this game a try. I don't care if it's through legal or illegal means. Find a way to play this title. You will not regret taking that chance. And that's it for my section. I'ma head on out and suplex that baby hippo moo dang. Thanks a million to my boy Cyrus for inviting me. Give him a like and a sub for all of his troubles. And if you're interested in what I do, come on and swing on by my channel for a hot sec. Have a wonderful day everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Hey there, you may call me Jade the Scribe. I talk about JRPGs and occasionally the animes right here on the YouTubes. First, I want to say thanks to Cyrus for having me on. Definitely an underrated YouTuber, almost as criminally underrated as Tales of the Abyss.
Well, what does that have to do with anything?
No. He's got a point.
What makes Tales of the Abyss underrated to me is how exceptional of a game it is in terms of story, world building, and combat, yet it's rarely brought up in the mainstream compared to other games in the Tales series or even other JRPGs just in general. The game follows Luc von Fabra, a spoiled noble that ends up on an adventure with a lady soldier called Tyr. After said lady soldier failed at assassinating his master, a man named Van. The core engine of the story story is Luke being tossed out into a world he doesn't understand and having his immature and asshole mentality challenged by the people around him. The main thematic idea of Tales of the Abyss centers on how much of who we become is couched in our environment and how much weight and effect our actions really have on the world around us. Despite me harping on about Luke, he's not the only imperfect character, not by a long shot, as the entire cast, good guys and bad, are extremely fleshed out with complex motives and desires that really stretch beyond good and evil. Abyss doesn't get enough credit for how well they pulled off such a risky storytelling move. Usually the goal of a writer is to really get you, the viewer, to love the main characters. You have to admit, it's pretty cool how they made Luke, this cocksucker main character, into such an endearing character after the first 10 plus hours of him being funny but this huge asshole. Now the gameplay is another thing, because I don't think it gets enough credit for being the first game after Symphonia to build on what the game introduced. The movement feels better, and they throw in some interesting magic mechanics with phonic arts. The environments, lore, and music are fucking god tier as well, with some of my favorite locations being the major cities of Batikal and Grand Kokma that really emphasize the fantastical element of the game while also being beautiful locations. In my opinion, this game has some of the best atmosphere of any JRPG from its generation. But yeah, that's what I think is one of the most underrated games. Once again, thanks Cyrus for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You know, sometimes I lie in bed and wonder how a series that's named God Eater didn't get a massive amount of recognition just off of its name alone. Like, guys, it's literally called God Eater. If that's not a name that captures the essence of most JRPGs right off the bat, I don't know what is. Okay, well technically it's a hunting RPG. It's often compared to Monster Hunter. The biggest difference between the two, however, is the setting and story. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, a good chunk of humanity has died out, and the survivors are being governed by one organization, Fenrir, at least for the majority of the series, making use of what are basically enhanced super soldiers with oversized weapons to fight back against the various monsters in the game, referred to as Aragami. And for a hunting game, the story is actually pretty good. It tells a mostly continuous narrative across its three main entries. It also boasts a variety of weapons and playstyles. Missions are also relatively short, so while the games are lengthy in totality, it's a game that's still very easy to play in chunks, where you can just pick it up, play a couple missions, and put it back down, without having to worry about locking in for really long missions or a really long cutscene or anything like that. I mean, it does happen a few times. Usually if you get to like the conclusion of an arc or something, then yeah, you might have a long cutscene, but if you're someone who has a busy schedule and maybe your time for gaming comes in short bursts, see what I did there? These are definitely games that while they have a lot of content, it's still very easy to weave it in with your busy schedule. As far as availability, the first two games were originally released on the PSP. God Eater 2 has a Vita version, if you're interested in that. The most common method of playing for most people, however, is probably going to either be the PS4 or PC versions, since they offer the most up-to-date versions of all three games and they're readily available on those platforms. Just fair warning though, the PC version can get pretty janky. It's mostly a bunch of little things. The game isn't unplayable by any means, but I would definitely recommend PS4 if you were to pick one. The PS4 version is locked at 30 frames, which does really suck, but that is my recommendation if you're starting out. Now, God Eater 3 in particular is also available on those two platforms and the Switch as well. So 3 is the only game in the series that's on Switch. But I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue if for some reason you only have a Switch and don't have any other platforms, because 3 is probably the second best starting point besides the first game. Even though the story between the three games is connected, 3 is a bit of a soft reboot because it takes place after a large time skip. Also, the girls are hot. Hey, listen, it's the oldest trick in the book. If me geeking out isn't gonna push you into the series, then I might as well try to invoke the powers of thirst. It was worth a shot. Anyway, I've said my piece. I could say way more, but I'd rather not burden Cyrus with a billion years of footage to sift through, so play God Eater. It's really cool.
Thanks for having me on, Cyrus. I knew instantly what game to discuss, the vastly underrated and mostly forgotten about Folklore, which released on the PlayStation 3 in 2007. To me, it was one of the more unique games on the system, and one of the few good uses of the 6-axis motion controls.
Hey there, Cyrus here again. Quick little editor's note. This was the game that revealed to me that my PS3 controller was not an officially licensed controller. The second I hit that tutorial and it wanted me to shake the controller to attack, I was like, why is nothing happening? Oh, those aren't fake eBay listings. They just get you every time. So to this day, I still have not played this game, despite it looking pretty cool.
Apparently, the developer Game Republic pitched 2 sequels to Sony, but were rejected because the initial game sold very poorly. Well, it isn't the most reliable of sources, so do take this with a massive pinch of salt. VG Chart states the game had less than 500,000 sales, which isn't surprising considering the PS3 had a very small install base in late 07, and it's a relatively niche game, even by JRPG standards. Sure, it has action combat, which generally appeals to the normies, but it's presented in a way that wouldn't have appealed to the bro gamers who were so prevalent in the hobby during the mid-2000s. The story is mostly told via comic book style cutscenes, with combat being a bit like Pokemon, because certain elements from the various folk creatures you use in combat will be strong to some types and weak to others, all while mixing in hack-and-slash combat. The game was also marketed poorly. In fact, I only learned about it because I had recently acquired a PS3 at the time and was looking for any interesting looking titles for the system. Beyond that, I maybe saw a few banner ads on GameSpot, but beyond that, nothing. So it's little wonder it failed. The internet was a very different place back then, so marketing to consumers was nowhere near as proliferated as it is now. But because of its sales and its unique nature, Folklore is a super underrated gem, and the gameplay still feels good to this day. Honestly, I feel like it's a game primed for release on PlayStation Plus Extra or Premium. Though if I'm honest, I wish Sony would just remaster the game outright. Anyways, thanks for having me on, Cyrus. Can't wait to see what choices other creators have made for this list. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.
Hi everybody, this is Kevin, and thank you Cyrus for including me in your video discussing underrated JRPGs. The game I would like to discuss today is none other than Star Ocean: The Divine Force, which is a relatively new game. It released at the end of 2022 as the 6th mainline entry in the Star Ocean franchise. And if you talk to most Star Ocean fans, I'm sure they'll say that Star Ocean: The Second Story, whichever version they choose, whether it's the PlayStation 1, PSP remake, or what I consider to be the definitive edition in Star Ocean: The Second Story R, is their favorite Star Ocean game. But yours truly over here believes that Star Ocean: The Divine Force is in fact the best Star Ocean game because of how it takes so many elements from the previous 5 games, applies them tenfold, and makes a really excellent JRPG experience. One of the best things about Star Ocean: The Divine Force is definitely the character selection, which makes its return from Star Ocean: The Second Story, and while the plot remains the same regardless of which character you choose, you get a different perspective. So, for instance, if you choose Raymond at the beginning of the game, you get the perspective of an off-worlder who crash lands on an underdeveloped planet, whereas if you choose Leticia, you get the perspective of a princess who lives on said underdeveloped planet. And there's more to it than that, obviously. There's one exclusive character based on the character you choose at the start of the game. Every other party member joins, but there's one exclusive for each. There's also exclusive private actions between the characters. Those are like your bonding events when you get to a new town. And a couple exclusive dungeons. Putting the 2 main characters aside, I really love the entire cast in this game, particularly the other party members. And oftentimes you'll play a JRPG and think to yourself, you know, this character resolved their story arc. What are they hanging around for? But that wasn't the case in Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Every character had a purpose to join the party and see it through to the end. There's also really interesting NPCs, in particular Raymond's father. What an excellent character he is, really funny. Excellent soundtrack from the legendary Motoi Sakuraba, who has not only composed the soundtracks for every Star Ocean game, but I think is most famous for his role in composing the soundtracks for the Tales of series. Similar to the other Star Ocean games, Star Ocean The Divine Force is an action RPG. In this case, there's a new mechanic introduced called Duma, which is this robot that helps you traverse as well as do powerful attacks. I really love the overworld exploration because as you unlock more abilities of Duma, you can reach different areas and find treasure chests and secrets and all sorts of other stuff, so it makes going to the same area twice worthwhile. Like any good JRPG, there are a number of side quests. In this case, you can go to the new town and, you gotta slay the monster, or I need 5 of this item, do little simple quests like that. But there's also a mini game called Asoa, which the best way to explain that is it's Star Ocean's version of chess, we'll say, similar to that. And then, of course, the private actions, which anytime you go to a new town, you can separate your party, and so you just control either Raymond or Leticia, whichever one you chose at the start of the game. And then you can find all your party members throughout the town, and if you interact with them, you get bonus cutscenes fleshing out their characters, learning more about them, and implementing the bonding system. And depending on how far you go with bonding each character, you get exclusive endings. I think there are 16 endings altogether, 8 with Raymond and 8 with Leticia, and there might even be a bad ending, or an ending if you don't max out all of the bond points of said character. But yeah, there's romantic endings for those interested in that, and you better believe I chose best girl. Well, I chose them all, but the best ones were definitely Elena and Marielle, that's for sure. There are also a number of waifus in this game for our men of culture, and the Best Girl award goes to Elena, of course, because goddamn! But putting Best Girl aside, there are waifus for everyone, such as Nina, Malkia, Marielle, and even Leticia, not to mention the various NPC waifus. Sadly, though, I do think this game was overlooked by many because you look at the aggregate on Metacritic and it has very mixed reviews. It's kind of a shame because I feel like a lot of JRPG fans did play this game. I played this game. I played through it twice to get both story arcs of Raymond and Leticia, and you're really going to like it, but maybe the general public just doesn't care because they see it and they think, oh, it's a by-the-numbers JRPG, the ragtag group of misfits who go and save the world, and all that stuff. It's been done a million times, but again, it was done so well in Star Ocean The Divine Force. I could go on for hours about this game. In fact, if you're interested in learning more, I have 3 videos on my channel. One, I recorded that at the halfway point in the game because there was something that I wanted to compare to Final Fantasy X. That's spoiler heavy, so watch that at your own discretion. But I did a video after completing Raymond's story, as well as Leticia's story, and I even did a Let's Play on my channel, so feel free to check them out if you're interested. I hope I was able to convince you to give Star Ocean The Divine Force a try. It's been out for a few years now, so you should be able to find it for a fair price. It's available on pretty much every console. I know it's available on the PS4, PS5, Xbox, as well as PC. No Nintendo Switch, but it's everywhere else, so you should be able to find it. And I can't recommend it enough. Thank you once again to Cyrus for including me in your video. I can't wait to watch it once it's finished and see what everyone else chooses for their underrated JRPG. And I hope if you enjoyed this, you check out my channel. I'm sure Cyrus will link it down below. But for now, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day and peace out.
And now last, but certainly not least, my pick for this video. You may be familiar with a little movement that this game was a part of. A fan campaign that was created to originally promote 3 specific titles in the West. And these were The Last Story, Pandora's Tower, and of course, the now beloved Xenoblade Chronicles. You can probably tell where this is going. Out of those three, my underrated pick is without a doubt Raid Shadow Legends! Okay, I'm just kidding. Wait, where are you guys going? No, please, come back, guys. Ow! Alright, I'm serious. I'll be serious this time. My pick is the 2013 action RPG, Pandora's Tower. This game follows the protagonist Aaron as he fights to rid the love of his life, Elena, of a curse that's slowly turning her into a monster. They eventually were led to the 13 Towers, with the only way to break the curse being to eat the flesh of the Masters, the 13 bosses that reside within the towers. You explore these massive floating towers as you battle your way through enemies in these custom-designed levels filled with platforming and environmental puzzles. The closest thing I could compare it to is a Zelda game, how the older 3D games used to be. And the game even has multiple different endings, depending on how strong your bond is with Elena. So it even has quite a bit of replayability. The thing that stuck with me for all these years has been the story, the music, and surprisingly, the little bits of lore that we get in the game. Even the bosses have their own stories to tell after defeating them, leading to some very interesting moments. And over the course of the game, you can interact with Elena, build up your bond with her, get to know a little bit more about her and the relationship between her and Aaron. There is a time limit with the game though, which indicates Elena's progress into fully turning into a monster. And upon giving her the flesh of the Masters, you're given these flashbacks, which serve as vehicles that propel the story forward, and slowly unravel the truth of the towers over time. It was a very basic story, but one that really left quite an impact on me with how everything ended up unfolding. The relationship between Aaron and Elena is definitely the star of the show, but the gameplay is fun enough, the bosses are varied, and require different tactics to defeat them, and the bits of lore and hints at the story left just enough breadcrumbs to keep me engaged the entire time. And it's one that, ever since I played it many years ago, has been an experience that's still stuck with me all this time later. Unfortunately, the game was met with mixed to generally average reviews, so the likelihood of us getting a second game, or even a remake or remaster, is unfortunately pretty low. So, if you've got a Nintendo Wii laying around, or a Wii U, hey, I don't judge, I absolutely recommend for you to give this game a shot. I would even argue that it's one of the Wii's better games. And I know I mentioned the OST earlier, don't take my word for it, here's a small taste. Beautiful, isn't it? And with all that being said, we had quite a lot of really amazing titles showcased in this video. I want to give a very special thank you to all my fellow creators who helped me with this collab. And of course, a very special thank you to Code J-Man. If you didn't reach out to me, this little project wouldn't have happened. So please, make sure to check out everybody who participated. You may just find a new favorite creator. My name is Cyrus, and I have been your host for this video. One last shout out to all of my channel members and supporters over on Patreon. You guys are awesome. I appreciate everything you do. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Alright, what's next?